Hello my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/PettyRevenge, where the revenges aren't life-destroying, but they're oh so satisfying. And in today's episode, Karens are starting all sorts of trouble once again, and one of them attacks a frickin' officer. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's lineup. Hit subscribe if you haven't, and as always, you can send or link your stories to this email right here. We're diving in. So, the mother of all Karens lives next door to me, and unsurprisingly, she isn't very neighborly or considerate at all. The woman chain smokes every day in her back garden, approximately 2 meters away from my bedroom window, and of course it wafts over, leaving me unable to enjoy my garden, unable to open my windows in the summer, and unable to dry my laundry in the garden, as it just ends up smelling like an ashtray. I've politely let her know that I have asthma and it's affecting my quality of life. I discussed that all I can do is kindly suggest that if she could smoke in her front garden instead, if she sees that my windows are open or that my clothes are out hang drying, as it would be greatly appreciated. Well, of course, there was no change to her behavior at all, and she didn't take it well. After that day, she started shouting over the fence at me, hurling abuse. The one time I used my garden with my friends, she complained about the noise of our conversations and laughter at 8 o'clock. Yet she blares music on a weekly basis so loudly that I can hear the lyrics to the songs that she's listening to. She also regularly shouts over the fence that she's unhappy about the state of my garden, but as it's a rental property, I can only do so much to fix it. Last summer, the garden was covered like a jungle in out-of-control tall weeds and had a huge stack of rotten furniture from former tenants. I decided to do all the weeding, which was a horrendous task that took many grueling weekends of my own work. I had to tolerate her chain smoking while doing this, and it makes me feel quite ill. I also called my local council to collect the rotten furniture, and when I was on the phone to the council, Karen starts abruptly shouting at me to shut up from her window. This was the only other occasion I've spoken audibly in my garden, other than the time I had a few friends over for dinner. So the petty revenge for the shouting is after the call, I audibly retorted, "So you don't want me to sort out the garden then? Then don't worry. After this, I won't put down weed killer or do the garden ever again." And since that day, I've let the weeds get out of control. A year on, the garden looks like a jungle again, with human-height tree-like weeds sprouting everywhere and covering every inch of my garden. It looks like the garden of a haunted house, and I know it'll drive my neighbor mad, especially because she knows it's a result of her own actions. When she looks out of her window, the view of my horrible garden will ruin her perfect one, and I can hear her muttering about it from time to time. As for the revenge on the chain smoking affecting my quality of life and basic enjoyment of my home, I may have found a delectable fart-scented spray called liquid ass that I'm contemplating spritzing out of the window and over the fence. Reviews online describe the product as revolting, overwhelming, and strong enough to induce coughing and gagging, and I'm quite tempted to use it to encourage her to smoke in her front garden instead. Guys, that woman does sound like a horribly inconsiderate neighbor. And honestly, if I were OP, I think I would have tossed dandelion seeds over the fence, instead of letting my garden get disgusting with over a year of growth. But with that said though, there are a few people who are saying that OP is the Karen in this situation, because that woman should be able to smoke where she wants, when she wants, on her property. But let me know what you would do in this situation. I was working at a Tim Hortons coffee shop in my youth. Think 19 to 20 years old, and I prided myself on polite and courteous service. I was always cheerful and tried my best to fill orders promptly. I managed this by telling myself that even the worst customer could just be a normal person on the most terrible day of their life. I usually brighten people's days and saw many grumpy people leave happier because of me, until the Karen comes in. On this day, I was dealing with a lunch rush, which means for several hours, people stream in as if food and drink had never existed and will never exist again. So there was a lot of people to get through. A lot. So under these conditions, the Karen shows herself. She was belligerent, rude, and had a truly massive order to fill, but nothing I couldn't handle. The woman had 8 different beverages ordered, and she had 3 dozen donuts. Which is fine, nothing out of the ordinary, but she had to have them specifically in a certain order in the boxes, and this took time as she ordered me about. Now I'm thinking, no problem, I've dealt with weirder things while working there. The line, however, was backing up while I was serving her, and her true colors began showing as I filled her order. Then we get to checkout and I ring her up. The woman then changes her order for like the 3rd time, and she wants to add 4 sandwiches. I ask her, "Ma'am, could we ring up the donuts and drinks first? Until I ring you through, it completely ties up a cash register." Hearing me say that, the Karen screeches, "I won't pay more taxes on my order. You won't cheat me." Now I stare at her rather dumbfounded at this logic. I tried to argue with her saying, "Ma'am, this won't increase your taxes, it's just faster." The Karen interrupts me and says, "No, you idiots won't scam me. I won't be cheated. Do you hear me?" I then shoot a deeply apologetic glance at my coworkers, who are now regretfully dealing with a crowd with one less cash register. I then proceed to head to the deli to make her sandwiches as fast as I physically can, so I can get back to the counter. The Karen smugly chides and reapproaches me while I make her order, saying to me, "You're making the sandwich wrong. Are you stupid?" And then tries several times to order me about as if I were a complete idiot. As I'm finishing my second sandwich, I'm getting irritated with her attitude. I inform her that I have to assemble the sandwiches in a certain order. I even have a physical chart to follow. With that, Karen harumphs at me while saying, "No one respects their elders anymore," and she screams "F you" and called me a bitch while I'm beginning my fourth sandwich. My sunny disposition was leaving me at this point. The woman obviously had no respect for me, thinks I'm incompetent, and doesn't care if she insults me. So I impulsively came up with a plan as I finished the fourth and final sandwich. Smacking my head, I say, "Oh, I almost forgot." The Karen grumbles and says, "Forgot what?" I say to her, "Well, we do have a new promotional offer, and I almost forgot to ask you about it. You see, the franchise has been doing ergonomic studies, and they've actually found that right-handed people and left-handed people actually hold bags differently." The Karen seemed to look interested, so I continue and say, "So with these findings, they designed ergonomic bags for their customers as a promotional offer. Would you like to participate?" The Karen huffs at me and says, "Of course I want to participate." I then give her my best customer service smile and say, "Okay, so would you like a left-handed bag or a right-handed bag?" At that, the Karen looks offended and she says, "A right one, of course, because left-handed people are blah blah blah." I say, "Of course, ma'am," and duck below the counter to quietly rummage through the completely identical paper bags I have. I decide to take the whole thing a step further, and I pop up with a look of pure regret on my face saying, "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but we only have left-handed bags at the moment. Is that okay?" Hearing that, the Karen's so upset with this turn of events, and she says she'll never come back to this location again because no one can do anything right. I then ask her, "So, do you still want a left-handed bag?" Not wanting to lose out on the promotion, Karen says, "Ugh, fine, give me a left-handed bag," as she grabs her order. I then ring her through and watch her walk out the door with complete satisfaction in my soul. Now, the added cherry on top is I heard her loudly complaining, telling everyone that we only have left-handed bags left. The woman walks out the door with her order, and the confused look on everyone's face was priceless, as this woman bitched and moaned about this completely made-up problem. I never did anything like this before or since. She was a special kind of a-hole, the Karen with the left-handed bag. Oh my frickin' goodness, guys, this PettyRevenge was absolutely brilliant. A left-handed paper bag. Karen, come on. Guys, I only wish I was around to see people's reactions when Karen talks about the left-handed paper bag she got that day. And I can only hope she posted a rant on social media about it. That'd be friggin' hilarious. So here's some backstory. When I was 12 years old, my mom got married to a halfway decent guy. The guy's not bad, but he's not great either, but he made my mom happy and that's all I cared about. In fact, I cared so much about her happiness that I was willing to endure 6 years of living under the same roof as his self-obsessed, obnoxious, spoiled daughter named Amy. The entire time we lived together, she would project all of her insecurities onto me in the form of insults. And being young and wildly insecure about myself, these daily insults cut me to the core and just continued the cycle of crippling insecurity. When I started talking to a boy for the first time named Kyle, she all of a sudden developed an intense infatuation with him and told me that I was forbidden from communicating with him because she wanted him. Now, I was insecure, but I wasn't a pushover. When I didn't listen to her demands, she took it a step further and told Kyle that I had an ongoing relationship with several other boys, which was untrue, and he unfortunately believed it, and I was completely crushed. She then swooped in and took every opportunity to rub it in my face that she won him. She would do things like invite him to my birthday dinners and parties at home, inviting me out with her, only later to reveal that I would be third-wheeling their date, or making him compliment me and then gloating about how she had such a nice boyfriend, etc, etc. This sort of thing happened countless times, not just with boys, but with friends and even workplaces. They ended up dating for 2 years, and although they had a nasty breakup, Kyle and I remained on good terms, which drove her up the wall. She would constantly ask me, "So, did you guys hook up behind my back yet?" while claiming to have moved on already. When we finally graduated high school, I couldn't be happier to move out to go to college. While I was finally living the life I wanted without her toxicity, she went to 2 different schools, both of which she dropped out after 1 semester at each. Eventually, she moved back in with our parents in our hometown, and she fell into her old ways again. On the eve of her 19th birthday, she posted to Facebook about how her friends had gifted her a fake ID, and raved about their plans to go club hopping for her birthday. Even though I lived 500 miles away, she still had to find some way to rub it in my face that I would be missing out on all the fun. I was invited to her birthday event page on Facebook, where she detailed all the extravagant and expensive things she planned for her special day. We're talking limo rental, VIP rooms at 2 of the biggest clubs in town, and even some photographer guy who would follow them around like paparazzi. She then made a public post on the event page where she tagged me and said, "It's gonna be amazing. You'll have to wait 2 years before you can experience any of this." Now, it had been about a year since I've last seen or spoken to her, and by this point, I was at a much more happier place with myself, emotionally. It took me a while to shake off the effects of her emotional abuse, but by God, I did it. And I wasn't gonna let her drag me back to those lows again. But this post got me to reminisce about all the things she'd done to me in the past, and I couldn't help but to feel a boiling rage inside. Now, unbeknownst to her, Kyle had recently reconnected with me on Facebook. It's only friendly conversation between us. We were catching up on each other's lives until he suggested that we meet up and have lunch. Lunch then turns into us having an afternoon crap talk fest about Amy. During this, he also confessed that he had feelings for me, but he couldn't forgive himself for letting Amy dangle him in front of me because he knew that I liked him. The guilt was apparently something he'd been carrying for years, and finally found the courage to apologize now. So here's where we get petty. I convinced Kyle to alert his brother, who happened to be the marketing director for one of the clubs that Amy had reservations for, the VIP room for her birthday plans. After he did that, I went home and called the limousine rental company and pretended to be a concerned parent, and insisted that no alcohol be available since several girls were underage. They let me know that they were very appreciative of the notice. And then I did a little digging and found out who the paparazzi guy would be, and called him to cancel his services for the event. With her birthday coming up in just a couple of days, I sat back and waited to let the chips fall where they may, and it was way better than I could have hoped for. When I asked about it a few days afterwards, she was sure to screech every beautiful detail to me over the phone. Since the limo didn't provide them with alcohol, they stopped by a friend's house to pre-game and sneak in their own supply. Once the driver noticed the gaggle of very drunk girls in his limo, he then stopped and made them throw away all the liquor they snuck in. When they got to the first club, Kyle's brother, who knew Amy as Kyle's ex, confronted them at the door and told them that there was no way in hell they were getting in. This was very upsetting to this group of drunk girls, and they all proceeded to make a huge drunken scene, going as far as showing him Amy's fake ID to prove they were allowed in. Except the name on the ID wasn't hers. Kyle's brother then had security forcibly remove them from the premises. As the cherry on top, he contacted his friends at the other clubs in town and warned them of Amy and her underage entourage, successfully banning her from every single dance club and bar in the 20-mile radius. She didn't even get a refund on the deposits for the VIP rooms, and she's lucky she wasn't arrested, but she still plays victim to horrible bad luck. So the gist of it is, my evil stepsister torments me in our teenage years, so I ruined her last teenage birthday by getting her banned from every club in town and making her waste thousands of dollars. Also, I slept with Kyle. Guys, you know what they say, revenge is best served calculated. And honestly, this kind of slips into pro-revenge territory, and that stepsister got exactly what she deserved. So this takes place when I was 18 years old and in my first managerial job position. I was a manager at a fast food burger joint. Like every place, we had the couple of usuals who were a-holes for the sake of being a-holes. And one of them was an over-the-top, egregiously aggressive woman who found fault with everything. And she would go ballistic if you so much as failed to address her as ma'am in every sentence. So things came to a head when she was so rude to one of our counter clerks that she actually made the girl cry. I tell the girl to go to the break room and take a breather, and then calmly inform the Karen that she was no longer welcome in our store. That triggered the nuclear option. I waited for the screaming and cursing to stop, waved her to the door, and then watched as she left. I then sent corporate her credit card info and license plate information, and they sent her a "you're banned from all the stores" letter, filed it with the local police department, and told us to call cops immediately if she ever shows up in our store again. Which she did, so a few weeks later, she actually shows up ready to launch into another tirade for whatever imagined offense might occur. We politely kick her out, despite her screaming that the do not trespass order was fake, wasn't legal, didn't apply to her, and her lawyer said blah blah blah. It happened again a couple of times. The woman wouldn't stop coming back, but eventually her luck broke, and there happened to be 2 cops on their dinner break in the restaurant. Now, I was on shift that night, and I can tell you that I have rarely been so satisfied as when I showed the officers the order, identified the woman as the person referred to in it, and told them about the frequent trespassing visits, and then watched them arrest her on the spot. Best of all, I never had to testify, and the woman goes totally ballistic and she scratched a cop's face. Now, there was no need to book her for trespassing when resisting arrest and cop assault were so convenient. Now, the vast majority of this story is instant karma, so why am I posting this in PettyRevenge? The answer's simple. After they hauled her away, I noticed that her car was still in our parking lot, and I'm thinking, oh yes. That call to the towing company was the most satisfying 2 minutes of my young life. And sure, I could have just let it sit there until she came back to get it, but if you make my register clerk cry, enjoy your trip to the impound lot, ma'am. So a lot of people have asked some questions, so here are some answers. How's the clerk doing? Well, she's fine by the next day. No lasting issues that I noticed. Did you stay in management? Nope, I quit in my freshman year of college. I'm more of a tech head these days, so I leave the management up to the other people. Why did you send the credit card number to corporate? Wouldn't that be mishandling of information to send it unsecured via email to the office? Well, when my franchise owner and I called corporate offices to report the incident, they asked for the entire receipt history for that visit, including the credit card number. I don't think we actually sent it to them, they just pulled it from their computers or something. And did I ever find out what happened to her in court? No, all I got was a call from the arresting officer saying that I would not need to give a statement other than what I told him at the time. Guys, the best part about this is not only did she get arrested, but she's gotta go get her car back from the impound lot after. Talk about adding insult to injury. A criminal record and a massive amount of fines, all because she was a frickin' Karen. So I was a paramedic for 15 years, and I've since left to pursue a trade. I'm not entirely bitter, I just needed to leave from burnout. So long, and thanks for all the PTSD, am I right? Anyways, a number of years ago, when I was shift supervisor, I had a 2-time run-in with my city's head Karen. This was a medium-sized city, and as a working supervisor, I would go on calls. We didn't have high call volumes, but like with any populated area, we had colorful encounters. On one Saturday night, we were called out to a domestic violence incident, which happens unfortunately from time to time, and we go to support police or treat a victim. Now, family violence is always an unfun night on the town, and no one likes going to these, but the worst places to attend calls that I've noticed are the richer areas of town. Entitlement plus money plus low class plus no emotional regulation ability times booze squared equals a real Cirque du dismay for everyone. We were arriving at this house for one male late 40s. His brother-in-law had assaulted him, and his wife Karen in our story wasn't taking his side. She would periodically interrupt us to scold or insult him. The argument, whatever it was, had degenerated into lobbing insults by the time we got there, and the 5 adults in the house were being poorly quieted by police. The incident was a trivial argument that escalated to simple assault, and a guest called 911. Our patient and his brother-in-law discovered in different ways that expensive wine bottles are resilient, and when swung at the head, they act more like a club than a piece of prop comedy. The guy had been smoked right in the center of the forehead, no loss of consciousness, just a bump and a bleed, stable but intoxicated. During the assessment, we discovered that he was on an opioid painkiller, and he had been taking it at 4 times the rate according to the label. And my reaction was, how many of these have you been taking? How many did you take tonight? You should not be taking that much and drinking. Tell me what you took. Now, opioid overdose thankfully didn't occur, but the lack of presentation and his wife's loud interjections, I'm confident that they were all just sauced. Karen during our assembly would butt in and talk over us, and I'd shoo her off. She'd circle around, repeat, and that's when I grew tired of this dance, so I asked the cops to give her a timeout while we worked. We then packed our patient into the ambulance and we finished the call with a drop-off to an ER department. The real fun began the night after, when our patient's wife called to launch one doozy of a complaint. Bad luck for both of us that I took the complaint, but good luck for me that she didn't ask for a name and I didn't volunteer it. She got what she wanted, which was a supervisor. I then listened to the complaints without paying much attention, taking notes, and I was actually bewildered by someone who appeared to hate their husband that much and she would still bother complaining. The woman used me like a grievance tampon for about 15 minutes, but it boiled down to 3 main points. Number 1, that it was outrageous for paramedics to be giving her husband medication advice, because we are not doctors, which was a valid point, but she was missing the crux of that line of questioning. His abuse of pills was a going concern. Number 2, we made her husband, the lightly wounded, walk with us to the ambulance. She knows that's an incredibly negligent act by paramedics because what she learned from her first aid course, which is you don't move people with head injuries. After that absolute trombone slide of a sentence, I could barely contain myself. I'm thinking, right, you don't move people with head injuries. That's my job. And number 3, she wanted to go in the ambulance, but it drove off without her. And yes, I did that on purpose while she was in her timeout with an officer. Guess why? When she was done venting visceral hate into my ear, I let her know that we'll be back in touch after an investigation. Following my sense of duty and ethics, I squealed on myself, reporting everything to my chief the next day. I went in early before my shift, laid it all out for him, and invited him with a barely suppressed giggle to investigate fully. With an unimpressed look that segued into an eye roll, he tells me to handle it in a professional manner. So taking his cue, I decide to call up Karen and lie almost non-stop to her. I layered on the fluff and platitudes with a trowel and Karen soaked it all in, and I'm sure she nearly climaxed when I mentioned disciplinary action taken. We then part ways and hang up, end of interactions. Satisfied that I properly resolved the issue, I turned to the group of co-workers in the room listening while it was on speakerphone, and we collapsed into laughter. To this day, I'm sure she believes I was punished. I'm also sure it was all because I gave her a timeout in her own gaudy HGTV nightmare. She should look at the scoreboard. Guys, I really do love what Opie did, and although it's funny, I really hate the fact that Karen thought she won that day. But that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /PettyRevenge. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's super satisfying stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you're not subscribed. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, I'll link it right here. A Karen decides to trespass and steal from OP, and she gets mad when police are called. Check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.